Have you ever considered how a single whisper can change the course of countless lives? Some words arrive softly, almost unnoticed, yet carry the weight of destiny. It was a quiet morning at Harrington Global, a towering glass fortress of commerce and ambition. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee, the soft hum of computers mingling with the distant chatter of employees. Before we continue, if you love stories that warm your heart and awaken emotions that help you to become a better person, be sure to subscribe to this channel and show your love by liking the video. Elena, the company's longtime cleaner, moved silently through the hallways, broom in hand, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. She had worked there for decades, unseen by most, yet intimately familiar with every corner of the building. Her eyes, sharp and attentive, often noticed things others overlooked. Today, she paused outside the CEO's office. Mr. Alexander Harrington, the billionaire owner, sat at his massive desk, papers stacked high before him. His sharp suit and impeccable tie did little to mask the tension etched across his face. Elena had overheard snippets of conversation over the past weeks, whispers of a deal, numbers that didn't quite add up, signatures demanded under tight deadlines. A small unease stirred in her chest. She had no authority, no title, yet a responsibility of a different kind, to watch, to listen, to protect in the ways she could. Steeling herself, she knocked lightly on the open door. "Sir, may I say something?" she whispered, almost afraid of breaking the invisible boundary between her world and his. Alexander glanced up, frowning. "Eleanor, what is it?" She took a small breath. "Don't sign it, sir, not yet. Something's wrong with these papers. I've seen mistakes, inconsistencies. Please just double-check before you finalize anything." His brow furrowed, skepticism clear. You're the cleaner. Why would you know about this?" Eleanor's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "Because I've been here. I've seen files, I've overheard conversations, I've noticed patterns others dismiss. I don't mean to question you. I just want to help." Alexander leaned back, fingers tapping the desk. There was a pause, long, uncertain, before he finally nodded. "All right. I'll take a look, but this better be something important." And in that moment, a quiet tension filled the room, the kind that precedes revelation, the kind that can change the trajectory of empires. Outside, the city hummed, unaware of the silent warning that could save a company from ruin. The faint scent of coffee, paper, and polished wood lingered, mixing with a subtle promise. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the most profound truths. Alexander sat at his desk, Elena's words echoing in his mind. He ran his fingers over the papers, scanning each line, each number, each clause. The office felt unusually quiet, the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant murmur of staff the only sounds accompanying him. The aroma of strong coffee filled the room, mingling with the faint leather scent of his chair, grounding him in the moment. Hours passed as he examined the documents with renewed attention. The weight of responsibility pressed on him, heavier than any boardroom discussion or shareholder meeting ever had. And then he saw it, a small, almost invisible discrepancy in the contract, a clause that could have cost the company millions, possibly even forced a collapse of one of their key ventures. His heart raced. How had no one else noticed this? How had it slipped past every manager, lawyer, and analyst? He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, a mixture of shock and gratitude washing over him. If Elena hadn't spoken up, the consequences could have been catastrophic. Suddenly the world felt quieter, slower, yet heavier with significance. He thought of her, the quiet woman who moved unnoticed through hallways, who cleaned offices and dusted desks, yet saw what others couldn't. He picked up the phone, calling his legal team immediately. "Hold everything," he said firmly. "Double-check every clause, every figure, no mistakes, and get me Elena. I need to speak with her." Minutes later, Elena stood at the doorway, hands clasped nervously, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Sir, did you?" she asked softly. Alexander rose, holding the corrected document in his hands. "You were right," he said, voice calm but laden with respect. "You saved us." "I don't know how to thank you properly." Eleanor shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. "I didn't do it for thanks. I just noticed something, and I wanted to help. That's all." The office, once a place of routine and hierarchy, now felt different, infused with a quiet reminder that true insight and value often come from the most unexpected places, and that humility and attentiveness can save more than money. They can save lives, livelihoods, and legacies. Alexander watched her, feeling a rare sense of awe. In that moment, he understood something profound. A company's greatest strength isn't always in its executives or assets, but in the quiet hearts that speak truth when it matters most. The following morning, Alexander called Elena to his office. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden lines across the polished floor. The faint scent of coffee and polished wood mingled with the crisp, cool air conditioning, giving the space a sense of quiet solemnity. "Elena," he began, his voice steady but warm, "I owe you more than I can say. You saved the company. Perhaps even more than that, you saved a great deal of trust, reputation, and opportunity." Elena stood humbly, hands clasped in front of her, her eyes downcast. I just did what I noticed needed doing. That's all, sir." "No," Alexander said firmly, stepping closer. "It's never just. You saw what others missed. You spoke when most would have stayed silent. That courage, that integrity, it's rare, and it deserves recognition." He handed her a small envelope, sealed but heavy with significance. "Inside is a token of appreciation, but more importantly, I want you to know that your voice, your insight, and your dedication will never go unnoticed again." Elena's fingers trembled slightly as she took the envelope. The smell of parchment and a faint trace of perfume lingered in her hands. She opened it slowly and found a handwritten note and a small gift, a gesture far beyond ordinary thanks, but one that spoke directly to her heart. I don't know what to say," she whispered, emotion rising in her voice. "You don't need to say anything," Alexander replied gently. "Just continue being the remarkable person you are. Let this be a reminder that your presence matters, that every act of attentiveness, every moment of courage, every whisper of truth, it all has value." Eleanor nodded, a quiet smile forming, her eyes glistening. She felt seen, truly seen for the first time in years, not for her title, not for her position, but for her heart, integrity, and insight. Outside, the city buzzed unaware, but inside that office, a small ripple of human connection had created a profound shift. Alexander understood that leadership was not only about decisions, contracts, or power, but about listening, trusting, and honoring those whose quiet strength often goes unnoticed. And Elena, once just the cleaner moving silently through hallways, realized that even the smallest voice could resonate far beyond expectation, shaping destinies and safeguarding legacies. Days passed, yet the impact of Elena's quiet intervention rippled through Harrington Global. The corrected deal prevented significant financial loss, restored confidence among investors, and gave employees a renewed sense of security. The air in the office felt lighter, filled with a subtle energy of relief and possibility. Alexander moved through the hallways with a new awareness, observing not only executives and managers, but also staff whose work often went unnoticed. Each nod, each smile, each careful action now carried more meaning than titles or positions ever could. Elena continued her rounds, broom in hand, her presence quiet but profoundly felt. Colleagues began noticing her more, not just for the cleanliness she maintained, but for the insight, attentiveness, and subtle wisdom she carried in every step. One junior manager approached Alexander nervously. "Sir, we heard what happened with the deal. It was Elena, wasn't it?" Alexander nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yes. And it taught me something invaluable. Insight and courage don't always come from the corner office." The manager blinked, understanding dawning. It changes how we should treat everyone, sir. Every voice matters." Alexander's eyes softened, and he looked toward the far end of the hallway where Eleanor passed silently. Exactly. Every voice, every perspective. Sometimes the smallest observations prevent the largest disasters. The office buzzed around them, phones ringing, keyboards clacking and voices echoing, yet within the hum there was a new rhythm, one of respect, attentiveness, and recognition. Elena felt a subtle shift too. She moved with quiet confidence, aware that her work mattered beyond sweeping floors or emptying trash. She had saved a company, yes, but she had also reminded the people around her, especially the billionaire at the top, that true value lies not in status, wealth, or recognition, but in courage, integrity, and the willingness to speak up when it matters most. Alexander watched her from his office window, the sun catching the glass towers beyond. He realized that leadership was no longer just about decisions and profit margins. It was about seeing the human heart in every role, listening when others are silent, and acting with humility. And in that moment, he understood a profound truth. Sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest power to transform lives, companies, and even the most hardened hearts. The boardroom was unusually quiet that morning, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, casting patterns of gold across the polished mahogany table. Alexander stood at the head of the room, papers in hand, his usual commanding presence softened by a rare humility. "Everyone," he began, voice steady but layered with emotion, "I want to share something remarkable that happened last week. A warning, a whisper, that prevented what could have been a devastating loss for our company." All eyes turned, curiosity and suspense hanging in the air. Alexander paused, letting the weight of anticipation settle. "It was Elena," he said, motioning toward the doorway. The longtime cleaner stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly, eyes wide with disbelief. Her attention, courage, and integrity caught a critical mistake that none of us saw. She acted without expectation of reward or recognition, yet her impact saved not only the company, but the livelihoods of countless people connected to it. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Colleagues exchanged astonished glances, whispers of admiration blending with surprise. Alexander continued, voice filled with sincerity. "Leadership is not only measured by decisions, profits, or titles. True leadership and true value is recognizing the strength and wisdom in every individual." Elena exemplifies this. She reminds us all that courage and integrity are found in the most unexpected places. Elena's eyes filled with tears, the faint scent of dust and cleaning supplies mingling with the polished elegance of the boardroom. She had never imagined that her quiet attentiveness would be acknowledged so publicly. The room erupted in applause, a mix of respect, admiration, and genuine gratitude. Colleagues approached her, offering smiles, handshakes, and words of heartfelt appreciation. For the first time, Eleanor felt truly seen, not as the cleaner who moved silently through the halls, but as a guardian of integrity, a quiet hero whose courage could ripple through an entire organization. Alexander watched her, pride and humility intermingling. He realized that wealth, power, and influence could never match the profound impact of courage, honesty, and attentiveness. Elena had taught him the most valuable lesson of all, that every voice matters, every act of care matters, and that integrity, even whispered, can save the world in ways no one could anticipate. And as the sun set beyond the skyscrapers, bathing the room in a golden glow, the company and its people had been transformed, not by money or titles, but by a single brave heart, willing to speak the truth. Weeks had passed since the boardroom recognition, yet the impact of Elena's courage continued to resonate. The office hummed with a new energy, a rhythm of attentiveness, respect, and collaboration that hadn't existed before. Sunlight spilled across desks, illuminating folders, papers, and the subtle smiles of employees who now felt valued beyond their titles. Alexander walked through the corridors, observing quietly. Employees paused, offering nods and greetings with genuine warmth. Even the quietest voices seemed to matter now, every small contribution carrying weight. He approached Elena as she organized supplies in a corner office she often tidied. "Elena," he said softly, "your actions have changed more than just the outcome of a single deal. You've transformed the way this company operates, the way we view each other, and the way I view leadership." Elena looked up, surprised by his sincerity. "Oh, Dine, I just did what I thought was right," she said, her voice gentle, almost humble. "That's exactly why it matters," Alexander replied. "Integrity doesn't always announce itself with grandeur. Sometimes it whispers in hallways, unseen. But its effect can ripple farther than anyone could imagine." The scent of polished wood, faint cleaning supplies, and fresh coffee mingled in the office, grounding both of them in the simple reality of everyday life. Alexander realized that leadership was no longer about commands or authority. It was about recognizing, nurturing, and trusting the people around you, regardless of their position. Elena returned to her tasks, quietly radiant, unaware of the profound influence she had created. Employees, who had once dismissed her as invisible, now approached her with respect, asking for guidance, sharing ideas, and acknowledging her insight. Alexander paused at the doorway, watching her. In her quiet, steadfast way, Elena had reminded him that true wealth, true power, and true leadership are measured not by profit margins or titles, but by the courage to speak truth, the integrity to act, and the compassion to notice what others overlook. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the office floor, he understood the smallest acts of courage could leave a lasting legacy, shaping not only a company, but the hearts of those within it, forever. A month later, a new challenge arose. A high-stakes contract, more lucrative than any before, landed on Alexander's desk. Advisors and executives pushed for immediate approval, their voices confident, persuasive, and insistent. Yet, Elena noticed discrepancies again. Subtle inconsistencies buried deep within clauses, numbers that didn't align, phrasing that could later cause irreparable damage. She hesitated at first, questioning whether she should speak up again. The first warning had earned her recognition, but this could put her reputation on the line. Still, her conscience prevailed. She approached Alexander quietly, the soft hum of office chatter around them, and said, "Sir, I think you need to look at this before signing. There are issues that could be disastrous if overlooked." Alexander, now attuned to her insight, raised an eyebrow. "Again?" he asked, not with disbelief, but with quiet trust. "Show me." They pored over the documents together, the faint scent of paper and coffee mingling in the room. Eleanor pointed out subtle errors, overlooked clauses, and potential pitfalls. Each observation, small on its own, revealed a pattern that could have caused catastrophic financial loss. Alexander leaned back, astonished. "Elena, You've done it again. I don't know how to repay you for this. Most would have stayed silent. Elena shook her head, eyes steady. I only speak when I see something that could hurt others, that's all. The moment was heavy with significance. Outside, the city's hum continued unaware, yet within the office, a quiet act of courage once again safeguarded the company and everyone depending on it. Alexander realized that integrity wasn't a one-time act. It was a continuous choice, a commitment to vigilance, honesty, and the courage to act, even when no one else noticed. Elena's steadfastness reminded him that true leadership involves listening, learning, and valuing every voice, no matter how small it may seem. And in that sunlit office, amidst papers and soft whispers, a billionaire understood the profound truth he had learned from the cleaner who had saved his company twice. The greatest power often resides not in wealth or status, but in a heart willing to speak truth when it matters most. The next week, the atmosphere at Harrington Global felt different, lighter, yet vibrant with anticipation. Sunlight poured through the glass walls, catching dust motes like tiny stars. The soft scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with polished wood, creating a comforting familiarity as employees moved about, buzzing with quiet excitement. Alexander had called a meeting, not an ordinary one, but a celebration. He stood before the staff, the usual stern edge softened by a genuine warmth. Today, we recognize someone extraordinary, he began, his voice steady, yet carrying emotion that resonated through the room. A person whose courage, integrity, and attentiveness have saved this company not once, but twice. Someone whose quiet heart reminds us that every voice matters. All eyes turned as Elena entered, hesitant, almost afraid of the attention she had never sought. She had spent years working silently, unnoticed, but today the room held a different energy, one of respect, admiration, and gratitude. Your actions, Alexander continued, are a lesson in courage and humility. You remind us that success is not measured by wealth or status, but by integrity, compassion, and the courage to act when it matters most. Elena, we thank you. The room erupted in applause. Employees approached her with smiles, handshakes, and whispered words of admiration. Her heart swelled, the weight of years of unnoticed work finally lifting. She felt seen, respected, and appreciated in a way she had never imagined. Alexander watched her quietly, the hum of the office and the gentle chatter of colleagues blending into a symphony of acknowledgement and change. He realized that the company itself had transformed, guided not by profit or power alone, but by values, courage, and the recognition of every human contribution. Elena returned to her tasks, quietly radiant, aware that her role, no matter how humble, had reshaped the culture around her. The office, once a place of hierarchy and routine, now pulsed with collaboration, respect, and attentiveness. And as the golden sunlight stretched across the floors and walls, Alexander understood a truth he had long overlooked. True leadership, true success, and true wealth are not measured in dollars or titles, but in the hearts we touch, the courage we embrace, and the integrity we uphold. Weeks turned into months, and the effects of Elena's courage continued to ripple through Harrington Global. The office, once a place of rigid hierarchy, now thrived on collaboration, attentiveness, and mutual respect. Laughter echoed more freely through hallways, and even the smallest contributions were noticed and valued. Alexander walked through the open-plan workspace, observing quietly. Staff approached him with ideas, suggestions, and insights, unafraid to speak because they knew their voices mattered. He realized that the transformation wasn't just in Elena's recognition. It was in the culture she had quietly inspired. One young analyst approached him hesitantly. "Sir, seeing Elena speak up and seeing you listen, it's changed how I work. I notice more, I speak more carefully, and I care more. It matters, even if no one else notices." Alexander smiled. warmth spreading across his face. Exactly. Every voice matters. Every act of integrity counts. That's the true strength of a team, of a company, and of life itself. Elena, moving through the office with her usual quiet grace, caught Alexander's eye. He nodded at her, a silent acknowledgement of her enduring influence. She smiled faintly, understanding that her role, small in the world's eyes, had created profound and lasting change. The scent of polished wood, fresh coffee, and soft paper lingered, mingling with the quiet hum of productivity and purpose. Alexander felt a profound shift within himself. His measures of success had transformed. It was no longer about profits or contracts. It was about integrity, courage, and the power of seeing the unseen. And in that sunlit office, where whispers had once prevented disaster, a culture of trust, courage, and attentiveness had taken root. One that would shape every decision, every relationship, and every outcome for years to come. Elena returned to her duties, content yet unaware of the magnitude of her impact. The company, its employees, and even the billionaire CEO had been forever changed, not by wealth or authority, but by a single brave voice willing to speak truth when it mattered most. Evening descended over the city, painting the skyscrapers with golden and amber hues. In the quiet office of Harrington Global, Eleanor finished her last rounds, gently placing a folded cloth on a polished desk. She paused for a moment, feeling the subtle shift in the atmosphere. The hum of work had softened into a rhythm of attentiveness, respect, and collaboration. Alexander approached her quietly. "Elena," he said softly, "do you realize what you've done? You've not only saved the company, but you've reshaped it. You've reminded all of us what truly matters." Eleanor shook her head, humility in her expression. "I only spoke because I saw something that could cause harm. That's all." "Don't know," Alexander replied firmly, eyes steady. "It is never just. Courage, integrity, attentiveness, these are the foundations of every lasting success. You've reminded me that leadership is not about control or status. It's about seeing, listening, and valuing every human contribution." A gentle breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying the faint scent of evening rain and distant city streets. Elena smiled faintly, realizing that her quiet vigilance had rippled outward, affecting not just contracts and finances, but the hearts and minds of everyone around her. Alexander continued, voice soft but resolute. "True wealth, true power, and true legacy are not measured in money or titles. They are measured in integrity, courage, and the lives we touch with our honesty and care." Elena looked around the office, once just a place of hierarchy, now transformed. The culture she had influenced, the respect, collaboration, and attentiveness, would endure long after that day, a living testament to the power of a single brave voice. As she returned to her work, Alexander stood by the window, gazing at the city lights beginning to twinkle. He understood fully that the smallest acts of courage and honesty could change destinies, not just of a company, but of every life connected to it. And in that quiet, sunlit office, a billionaire learned what he could never have bought, no matter the fortune. That true impact is born from integrity, true leadership is born from humility, and the greatest power lies in hearts willing to speak the truth when it matters most. Courage and integrity are not measured by status or wealth, but by the willingness to speak truth and act with honesty. Even the smallest voice, when guided by conscience, can change lives, transform organizations, and leave a legacy far greater than any fortune.